Our life is an apprenticeship to the truth that around every circle another can be drawn, that there is no end in nature, but every end is a beginning, that there is always another dawn risen on mid-noon, and under every deep a lower deep opens. Circles by Ralph Waldo Emerson is such a wonderful addition to his very well-known essay Self-Reliance, and I think if you couple the two together, I cannot think of any text that has influenced my thinking and my relationship to my own ideas as much as those two have. This essay can teach us so much about impermanence, about how to change your mind and why you should, how to become a truly great thinker, and how to grow young instead of growing old. Just the first lines are absolutely gold, I find. The eye is the first circle, the horizon which it forms is the second, and throughout nature this primary figure is repeated without end. It is the highest emblem in the cipher of the world. St. Augustine described the nature of God as a circle whose center was everywhere and its circumference nowhere. How beautiful is that thought that God is a circle whose center is everywhere and its circumference is nowhere. That means the end cannot be found, and its center is wherever you're at in the moment, and also everywhere else at the same time. I truly feel that amongst the few experiences I've had that I can call godly or meeting something godly. That must be one of the most beautiful, accurate and simple descriptions I've heard. Let's keep on reading, page 2. Our culture is the predominance of an idea which draws after it this train of cities and institutions. Yeah, I think the question we really have to ask ourselves is, what is the idea that our culture is built on, and why does it demand so much conformity from us? I always find culture a little bit of a narrowing a word even. I don't really like it. I feel like it's a lot of people coming together, agreeing to some idea, instead of thinking independently and relating as independent thinkers and people with each other. And Emerson also says a little bit later in the essay that the virtues of society are vices of the saint. So yeah, I think, conformity would be one of them. Sameness in general, like becoming uniform in a way, following a leader or a predetermined thought. So after he says that our culture is the predominance of an idea which draws after it this train of cities and institutions, he says, let us rise into another idea. It really makes me think of Khalil Gibran, who has this beautiful poem on children, and that poem basically talks about the nature of life and how we always have to move forward instead of moving back. And he says that, when you have children, for example, you should give them your love but not your thoughts, for life goes not backward nor carries within yesterday. Yeah, so I think it really doesn't matter where we're at in our lives. The only thing we have to ask ourselves is, how can we draw a bigger circle? What is the next idea? How can I widen my perspective, my empathy, my understanding? How can I bring that to another level, And I think the past is most probably not going to give us the answers, even though there's an argument for that, of course. I think that Emerson in particularly does not believe that at all, and that is a little bit what feels heavy about culture to me, is this insane adherence to old structures in a way. And this essay, what really strikes me about it is that it's so simple, an innocent few pages, but if you really take them to heart, I think this could form a completely new thinker and a new society in general. Another lovely quote is, "Everything looks permanent until its secret is known." Yeah, I think I watched a video once by Leo from actualize.org, which was about impermanence and the fact that if you look deeply enough, absolutely everything that you know at this moment to have any sort of existence will be gone one day. It's only a matter of time. Even the most solid rock, even the writings of Shakespeare, anything you can think of that has existed for a long time will perish one day. And the freedom and lightness that can bring to life, if you look a little bit beyond the fear, is really striking. And the fact that this idea comes back in so many spiritual schools, I guess, there must be some kind of truth to it, I think. The key to every man is his thought. Sturdy and defying though he look, he has a helm which he obeys, which is the idea after which all his facts are classified. He can only be reformed by showing him a new idea which commands his own. The life of man is a self-evolving circle which from a ring imperceptibly small from a ring imperceptibly small rushes on all sides outwards to new and larger circles, and that without end. The extent to which this generation of circles, wheel without wheel, will go depends on the force of truth of the individual soul. Okay, how beautiful. So, depending on how strong the force of truth is inside of you, you will lead more circles. You will draw bigger circles in your life, and you will keep changing your mind, basically, which I think can be such a great parameter of how fast you're evolving, is how often you change your mind on something. Emerson also famously said that a foolish consistency is the hobgoblin of little minds, right? So, absolutely, the aim of learning something is to unlearn what you have known before. Fear not the new generalization. Does the fact look crass and material, threatening to degrade thy theory of spirit? Resist it not. It goes to refine and rise thy theory of matter just as much. There are no fixtures to men, if we appeal to consciousness. Every man supposes himself not to be fully understood, and if there is any truth in him, if he rests at last on the divine soul, I see not how it can be otherwise. The last chamber, the last closet, he must feel was never opened. There is always a residuum unknown, unanalyzable. That is, every man believes that he has a greater possibility. I also love how he says that our moods do not believe in each other. And I think that means that when we're into a certain idea or in an emotion, it's very hard to believe that there are other ones as well, which also makes me think of a beautiful Emily Dickinson poem where she writes about that feeling when you're in pain, that it seems everlasting and you can never get out of it. In my edition, that's number 650. Pain has an element of blank. It cannot recollect when it begun, or if there were a time when it was not. It has no future but itself, its infinite contained, its past enlightened to perceive new periods of pain. Right? So I think in essence this essay is such a wonderful reminder of the fact that whatever you think you're in at the moment, there's gonna be another realization, a bigger circle to be drawn, another truth added to that, and you're gonna probably have to shed whatever you're going through at some point. And that's not bad. I think sometimes we're trying to figure out our life philosophy or some kind of ultimate truth, and the longer you do it, you realize you'll never arrive at that point, and that also it doesn't matter, because all that matters is that you're on the path, you know, that you keep refining your thoughts and your actions, and that you keep growing. At least that's what I think at the moment. It might change. Beware when the great God lets loose a thinker on this planet, then all things are at risk. We all stand waiting, empty, knowing possibly that we can be full, surrounded by mighty symbols which are not symbols to us, but prose and trivial toys. Then cometh the God, and converts the statues into fiery men, and by a flash of his eye burns up the veil which shrouded all things, and the meaning of the very furniture, of cup and saucer, of chair and clock and tester is manifest. The facts which loom so large in the fogs of yesterday, property, climate, breeding, personal beauty, and the like, have strangely changed their proportions. All that we reckon settled shakes and rattles, and literatures, cities, climates, religions leave their foundations and dance before our eyes. Yeah. So how wonderful, you know, when a thinker is let loose, or when you let a thinker let loose onto yourself, there's gonna ensue a period of chaos, right, where things have to find a new order again. And sometimes I think that collectively we're probably in such a state right now. And adding to this idea of chaos, there's another beautiful quote. If you're a reader, you're gonna love this. I think this perfectly sums up why one should read, why I read, amongst other things, but this is just very, very well put. So he says, therefore we value the poet. All the argument and all the wisdom is not in the encyclopedia, or the treatise of metaphysics, or the body of divinity, but in the sonnet or the play. In my daily work I incline to repeat my old steps, and do not believe in remedial force, in the power of change and reform. But some Petrarch or Ariosto, filled with the new wine of his imagination, writes me an ode or a brisk romance, full of daring thought and action. He smits and arouses me with his shrill tones, breaks up my whole chain of habits, and I open my eye on my own possibilities. He claps wings on the sides of all the solid old lumber of the world, and I am capable, once more, of choosing a straight path in theory and in practice. Okay, so if this resonates with you, I would love to know what the last book was that you read that had this kind of effect on you, you know, that just broke you out of your habit and inspired you to do something new. I think for me it must be my reading of In Search of Lost Time by Proust, and it makes me suddenly see everything through the lens of memory and compassion for people's lives and their stories and what they've been through and where it all comes from. You don't need to reform yourself if a text is good enough. It does the job for you. So I think that's beautiful. One man's justice is another's injustice. One man's beauty, another's ugliness. One man's wisdom, another's folly, as one beholds the same objects from a higher point. Yeah, so this is what books also help me to do, and this essay really helps me to do, is just seeing things from another perspective. Not even a higher perspective, but just a different perspective. So, how can you become more flexible in thought and in habit? What would you have to look at from a different side? I find that really good questions to ask myself on a regular basis. And towards the end of the essay, he says, "Let me remind the reader that I am only an experimenter. Do not set the least value on what I do, or the least discredit on what I do not, as if I pretended to settle anything as true or false. I unsettle all things. No facts are to me sacred, none are profane. I simply experiment, an endless seeker, with no past on my back." So that I find a completely wonderful position of a teacher, how he says, do not take my word, do not take my actions as guides, find out for yourself. And to be at the same time so instructive and so humble, I think is truly the mark of a great teacher, a great mentor, a great writer. And I'm not surprised that Emerson's writings have survived all this time and are still so relevant, as he has found a truly wonderful way to put these workings of the human mind into words. The one thing which we seek with insatiable desire is to forget ourselves, to be surprised out of our propriety, to lose our sempiternal memory, and to do something without knowing how or why. In short, to draw a new circle. Nothing great was ever achieved without enthusiasm. The way of life is wonderful. It is by abandonment. The great moments of history are the facilities of performance through the strength of ideas, as the work of genius and religion. "A man," said Oliver Cromwell, "never rises so high as when he knows not whither he is going." Dreams and drunkenness, the use of opium and alcohol, are the semblance and counterfeit of this oracular genius, and hence their dangerous attraction for men. For the like reason they ask the aid of wild passions, as in gaming and war, to ape, in some manner, these flames and generosities of the heart.